From dismantling the Department of Education to establishing Trump accounts, President Trump has arguably made some of the most enduring reforms to education. Joining me now to discuss how these reforms will play out in the future is columnist Gregory Lyakhov. Gregory, great to have you back with us. So you've said President Trump, in his first year of his second term, delivered the most meaningful education reforms in decades. Here's the president talking about his goals for education this March.
We're going to educate the children in their states where they can get a proper education. The numbers are horrible the way it is, and we're going to make a move that's very big. I don't think it's even risky a little bit. I think it's going to be amazing.
So, Gregory, what would you say are some examples of the most meaningful changes that the president has enacted for education?
Definitely. Well, look, President Trump's education reforms can be summed up in one sentence, and that is finally giving power back to the parents and back to the students. For decades, we had the situation in our education policy where parents and students were being neglected and their choices were not being heard by our education system. Rather, the teacher union and the teacher cartels, those were the people that were running the education students for millions of students. And I'll give you some examples. Well, President Trump is the first president in history to expand 5 to 9 accounts, which are tax deduction free accounts, where parents can finally put money in 5 to 9 accounts that aren't just for college. Rather, they're for K through 12 expenses too, like therapy, like K through 12 tuition, like charter school tuition and private school tuition. These are just some of the many examples that President Trump has implemented to finally shift power back to parents and students rather than relying on the big government to control education for students all over the country.
So, Gregory, how have the president's policies shifted authority away from bureaucracy and back into the hands of families so far?
Yeah, well, the Federal Department of Education is one of the biggest bureaucracies we have. We spend around $4 billion just to run the bureaucracy, not even to run the entire department and actually do what they are told, but actually just to pay the people that work in that department, the Department of Education. That's $4 billion. It's a huge amount. The entire department spends around $400 billion worth of money on whatever they do. And the truth is that their reforms, what the Department of Education actually does not reach K through 12 students. K through 12 students have been neglected for ages now by the Department of Education. And rather, the Department of Education has turned into a department that just runs a student loan program. If we just need student loans from the Department of Education, then we could have another department that's just focused on student loans. We don't need to disguise the Department of Education as something that has education policy for all, including K through 12 education policy and upper education policy. Rather, we could just have a student loan department. Instead, we have this bureaucracy that is pointless. Finally, the president has decided, rightfully, that this department is pointless and he wants to gut it. And the truth is that now the Department of Education is doing a great job under the Trump administration. It's allocating money properly. But when the next Democrat administration will roll in, which will happen eventually, the Department of Education is just going to go back to the Biden years, where they spent billions of dollars each year on things that made no sense, whether they're LGBTQ transition surgeries that the department funded or other wasteful spending. And that's really what Donald Trump has been against. He has been against wasteful spending, and it applies to the Department of Education.
Gregory, you're clearly passionate about this. You're actually one of the youngest nationally syndicated columnists from what I understand. What have you seen firsthand as sort of the impacts to your generation from, the Department of Education prior to Trump gutting it?
Very good question. Yeah. So, well, I want to speak from my personal experience. I had a very unique personal experience in high school, which I'm still in, where my teachers actually promoted and allowed for civil discourse to happen in classes. I'll give you an example. In my AP Advanced Placement Government class, where we talk about U.S. government and politics, there I am one of the most outspoken voices because I love the topic, but also because I'm given the opportunity to speak. When students are given the opportunity to speak, when they're actually engaging in civil discussion and debate, the outcomes are much more positive. And rather than just being in this echo chamber, they're actually able to express themselves. But my experience is not a representation of the experience of thousands of K through 12 students. Mamdani, for example, Zoran Mamdani is a perfect example of this. When hundreds of thousands of young people, whether they're straight out of college, whether they're straight out of high school, decided to vote for a socialist mayor because their civics education was so bad in their K through 12 years that the first thing they hear, the first thing that excites them in politics is what they go for. And look, all around the country, we are seeing a common trend. When K through 12 students get a bad civil education in high school, they're going to screw up their voting patterns for the rest of their lives. We see thousands of protests even right now happening with ICE, where high school students are walking out on these anti-ICE protests. This is a perfect example of how civil education in high school could mess up a student's career. They're going after law enforcement. They're protesting law enforcement. That's what high schools have been teaching them to do. And that is the wrong pathway. It's just one of the many examples of how civil education in K through 12 years has failed American students.
Well, Gregory, you certainly speak beyond your years. I'm sure there's a lot of viewers that are parents that are probably curious about where to find the curriculum you've been learning from. Gregory Lyakhov, really appreciate you joining us.